Live from our 7 Tasmania studios, your nightly news with Louise Huber begins now.
Good evening, everyone. Protesters around the country have gathered to rally against the COVID vaccine rollout in Australia. More than 100 people gathered in Hobart on the eve of the first Pfizer jabs arriving in Tasmania, a move the Premier has called disappointing.
Gathering on the lawns outside Parliament before marching the streets of Hobart. These protests as part of the national march against mandatory COVID vaccinations.
We are worried about being coerced into taking especially preventative treatments when you're not actually sick, like vaccines, as an entry requirement for airports, planes, jobs, schools.
People are kind of being herded into accepting a vaccine when from the media, from every which way.
More than 100 people joining in on the protest, travelling from right around the state. There has been no indication that the vaccination will be compulsory for the general public.
Protests like this are happening right around the country today, holding up signs saying things like "My body, my choice" and "I do not consent."
The movement condemned by the Premier.
To be frank, it's really disappointing what's going on with the anti-vaxxers at the moment.
The rhetoric is dangerous. The rhetoric does send the wrong message. It's very important that people follow the medical advice.
The Australian Medical Association says the advice is that the vaccine is safe.
The TGA would not approve a vaccine if it wasn't safe and if it hadn't been through a thorough process, which is why we're getting the vaccine in February, March, instead of, in November, December.
And with the Pfizer vaccine set to touch down in the state tomorrow, the government hopes Tasmanians won't be deterred.
It does give me great heart is that Tasmanians have a very high level of vaccination, both with the flu and meningococcal, and I would hope that Tasmanians would continue with that same traits.
Meg Sides, 7 Tasmania News.
In developing news, a light plane has crashed while attempting to land at Wynyard Airport. Police say the male pilot exited the aircraft after the incident at around 4 this afternoon and is currently being assessed by paramedics. The Australian Transport Safety Bureau will investigate. The AFL's latest response to Tasmania's bid for its own team has been labelled as disgraceful. The Premier is now facing pressure to reveal his next move and decide whether to extend current sponsorship deals with Hawthorn and North Melbourne or chase new events.
It's a letter that has Tasmanian footy fans calling foul. Blaming COVID, AFL CEO Gil McLachlan telling Premier Peter Gutwein a decision on a local team will be delayed for another 12 months while the submission is independently reviewed. The response uniting the state's political divide.
The AFL has been treating Tasmania with disrespect. Beggars belief the letter that I received yesterday and the fact that the AFL now want to kick the can down the road again for another 12 months.
This is a disgraceful response from the AFL. It's disrespectful. The work's been done and Tasmanians deserve better.
The task force behind the bid also upset, saying the state deserves more than continuing inaction, and there's a lack of urgency and understanding. However, Hawthorn President Jeff Kennett has backed the league's viewpoint, saying the pandemic shifted the goalpost.
They just didn't have, I don't think, the manpower nor the time to actually prepare the response that is now necessary.
They could have put that independent consultant on to look at the report last March.
The clock is ticking for Hawthorn and North Melbourne, whose deals run out this year. While a decision on whether to give the two clubs the boot hasn't been made, the Premier says talks remain on hold.
Those negotiations are on hold until we have some clarity. I need to have clarity before we consider what those deals might look like moving forward.
But the final siren on those partnerships could blow before then, with Hawthorn setting its own deadline.
We do have to have a decision by the middle of the year in the event that he doesn't want us to continue to play.
The opposition urging the Premier to reveal whether there is a plan B to lure other winter events to the state.
He set the deadline for the AFL. The AFL has not met that deadline. Tasmanians now need to hear from the Premier about what his strategy is.
This is an ongoing process that, to get clarity.
The Premier hoping the winds of change will blow Tasmania's way. John Hunt, 7 Tasmania News.
Voluntary assisted dying laws are expected to officially be passed by the Tasmanian Parliament in just over a week when the legislation returns to the lower house for a final time. Supporters of the bill are gathering outside Parliament House this evening. For more, our reporter Meg Sides joins us live. Meg, what's happening down there tonight?
Good evening, Lou. A candlelight vigil is being held down here tonight in support of the voluntary assisted dying legislation. As you can see behind me, setup is well underway with tea light candles being scattered on the lawns of Parliament House, many with the names of loved ones who've died printed on the side. As the sun goes down, Parliament House will also be lit up with purple light. The vigil has been organised by Jackie and Natalie Gray, who've been advocating for the legislation on behalf of their mother, who died after a battle with cancer. I spoke to them just a few moments ago.
Tonight is a candlelight vigil in support of voluntary assisted dying laws for those who weren't given the choice when they were faced with a terminal diagnosis. And tonight we light the candles for hope, compassion and honour.
Louise, at this stage, the legislation does have the numbers to pass the lower house. That's despite some members reserving their right to vote against it, depending on the findings of a review by a University of Tasmania panel due any day now. And as you mentioned, that legislation is expected to officially pass through the Parliament in the first week of March.
Vandalism to the Truganini Memorial on Bruny Island has been condemned as disappointing and unacceptable. Truganini was a famous Aboriginal woman born on the island who lived through the British settlement era. Residents were outraged this week to discover Captain Cook's face had been stencilled onto the stone monument. The state government says work has begun to repair the damage and is urging anyone with information to come forward. Critical upgrades to the East Coast stretch of the Tasman Highway will start within weeks, with the state government announcing civil contractor Gradco will head the operation. Overtaking lanes and road widening will occur between Diana's Basin and St Helens to future-proof for the region's predicted tourism boom. Members of the Tasmanian Aboriginal community say they felt a huge shift towards the greater appreciation for their culture over the last 2 years. Today, that heritage was celebrated in Launceston with everything from healing circles to basket weaving.
A modern glimpse into a culture thousands of years old.
So this is just showing a softer side to the Aboriginal community.
A first-hand insight into traditional stringing, fire sticks and kelp bowls as part of the Aboriginal Culture Day in Launceston.
I think it's brilliant. It helps break down those barriers between us because I'm being asked questions about growing up and all of that, and I'm quite happy to tell my story.
In its second year, the event is aiming to increase knowledge and appreciation of First Nations culture, something the Aboriginal community believes has improved in recent times.
I'm an owner of this country. This is my land. And I think people are starting to accept that.
Organisers say the day's success has paved the way for similar events across Tasmania over the coming year.
To get it out to more non-Aboriginal community members to understand and learn a bit more around the history of Aboriginal culture and how they survived and thrived here.
Particularly pleased with the strong showing of young people of all backgrounds, the ones they say will help carry the culture into the future and drive change.
They'll go away today with painted clapsticks or some knotty vine. They'll take that home to their families, they'll take it home to Gran and Pop and to their schools.
Garth Burley, 7 Tasmania News.
Queensland has stunned Tasmania in the Sheffield Shield, pulling off a remarkable win at Blunston Arena. Tasmania getting off to a strong start with Jackson Bird removing Bryce Street and Joe Burns early in the first session. Marcus Labuschagne and Usman Khawaja steadying the ship with a 137-run partnership. Khawaja eventually bringing up his century of 181 balls.
It's going to race away for 4 and Usman Khawaja, raise your bat. That is a magnificent century.
The Bulls chasing down the target of 310 with 3 wickets to spare.
Good evening. Launceston reached a high of 30 today, 25 in Burnie, Devonport 23 and Hobart 21. A high of 20 across King Island and Strawn, Smithton 26 and 25 at Lyowini. On the close-up shows the cold front located over the north-east slowly crossing the state. Further out shows a band of cloud associated with the cold front moving across south-east Australia, while thunderstorms are seen over South Australia and Queensland. Tomorrow, a cold front approaches Tasmania from the west, while a low pressure system lies offshore from southeast Queensland. Southwest to northwesterly winds tomorrow 10 to 15 knots, swells up to 3 metres in the west and south and up to 2 metres in the north. Tomorrow's forecast now: possible light showers across Hobart and Richmond, ooze 28. In the north, Launceston and Deloraine mostly sunny 23 at Devonport. Burnie tomorrow mostly sunny 20 at Strawn, Currie partly cloudy. St Helens mostly sunny, Swansea 24 and Whitemark partly cloudy. The UV forecast is very high 9s across the state with the sun rising at 6:41 a.m. tomorrow. Looking ahead to the 3-day forecast: Monday, showers about the west and far south, fine elsewhere. Tuesday, showers continue across the west and south, decreasing later in the day. And Wednesday, more showers about the west and far south, fine elsewhere. Capital cities, 35 and sunny in Perth tomorrow. Melbourne, partly cloudy and 28 in Sydney. And currently Hobart cloudy and 18, Launceston 24 and Devonport sunny and 21. That's all for weather tonight, Lou.
Lovely, thanks for that, Jackie. And that's all your news for this Saturday evening. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you tomorrow. Good night.